When Elena Voss walked into a pawn shop to sell her wedding ring just to feed her children, she thought she was losing the last piece of her life. Until a silent stranger named Dante Moretti offered a price so impossible, it meant he knew exactly what she had endured. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and subscribe if you love emotional mafia boss stories with unforgettable twists. The bell above the door gave a tired, metallic chime as Elena Voss stepped into the pawn shop, and for a moment, she just stood there. The air smelled like dust and old metal. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright in some places, too dim in others, casting everything in a tired, uneven glow. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with watches that had outlived their owners, necklaces that had once meant something, guitars that had probably been played in better rooms than this one. Elena didn't belong here. You could see it in the way she held herself. Not proud exactly, not confident, but careful. Like someone trying very hard not to fall apart in a place where falling apart would be witnessed. Her fingers tightened slightly around the small velvet pouch in her hand. Inside it was the last thing she had left. She moved forward slowly, each step measured, as if walking too fast might somehow make this more real. The man behind the counter barely looked up at first. He was middle-aged, thick around the waist, flipping through something on his phone with the bored detachment of someone who had seen every kind of desperation and stopped caring years ago. "What are you selling?" he asked without looking at her. The question landed harder than it should have. Elena swallowed. For a second, she almost turned around, almost walked back out that door, back into the cold car where Lily and Noah were waiting with the kind of quiet patience children learn when they know things are not okay. But she didn't, because Lily hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, because Noah had asked that morning, in a voice too careful for a 6-year-old, if they could have something warm for dinner tonight. Because there was $11 in her wallet and it wasn't enough. Her hand moved, slowly, deliberately. She set the velvet pouch on the counter and pushed it forward. The man sighed, finally looking up, already bored. "Let's see it." Elena nodded once. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she opened the pouch. And then she took it out. The ring caught the light immediately. Simple. Gold. A single diamond, not large, but clear, clean, carefully set. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be. It was the kind of ring chosen for meaning, not for show. For a second, she just held it there between her fingers, not letting go. Her thumb brushed over the band in a small, unconscious motion, like she was memorizing the shape of it one last time. There had been a day, years ago, when this ring had meant something very different. A promise, a future, a version of herself that believed in things she didn't believe in anymore. That girl felt very far away now. "Ma'am?" the man prompted, impatience creeping into his voice. Elena blinked. Right. She placed the ring on the glass. The sound it made was soft, almost nothing. But to her, it felt louder than it should have, like something ending. The man picked it up, turning it under the light with practiced indifference. "Gold. Diamond's decent," he muttered, already reaching for his tools. Elena's hands moved to her sides, flattening against her thighs, pressing hard like she could anchor herself there. Don't shake, don't cry, not here, not in front of him. Her gaze drifted just for a moment toward the front window of the shop. She could see the car from here. Old, faded blue, parked crooked because the steering had been off for months and she couldn't afford to fix it. Inside, in the back seat, Lily was leaning her head against the window, her eyes half-lidded with that quiet, hungry exhaustion Elena recognized too well. Noah sat beside her, small hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead like he was trying to be good. Like being good might make things easier. Elena's throat tightened. She looked away quickly. Back to the counter, back to the man, back to the ring, her ring. The last thing she had kept when everything else had been stripped away piece by piece. Furniture, savings, dignity, the illusion that someone was coming to help. She had told herself she would never sell it, that no matter what happened, this would be the line, the one thing she wouldn't cross. And yet here she was. Because hunger redraws lines. because children come before pride, because sometimes survival looks like letting go of the last thing that proves you once had something worth keeping. The man scratched at the edge of the diamond with a tool, barely gentle. "Where'd you get it?" he asked casually. Elena's answer came out steady, too steady. "It was mine." He shrugged, uninterested in the story behind it. To him, it was just weight, just value, just another transaction. But to Elena, it was the last piece of a life that had already been taken from her, and she was about to give it away. She straightened slightly, drawing in a slow breath, gathering what little composure she had left. "Can you tell me what it's worth?" she asked quietly. Her voice didn't break, but it came very, very close. By the time Elena Voss stepped back out onto the street, the cold hit her like something personal. It wasn't just the wind. It was the kind of cold that settles into your bones when you haven't eaten properly in days. The kind that makes your hands stiff and your thoughts slower, like your body is trying to conserve whatever little energy it has left. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, even though the lining had thinned so much it barely held warmth anymore. For a moment, she just stood there on the sidewalk. The velvet pouch was gone. The ring was gone. And in its place, in her pocket, was a folded stack of bills that felt heavier than it should have, not because of the amount, but because of what it had cost her. Elena closed her eyes briefly, pressing her lips together as she steadied herself. "Not here. You can fall apart later. Right now, you have to move." She walked toward the car. Each step felt deliberate, controlled, like she was holding something fragile inside her chest, and if she moved too fast, it would crack open in the middle of the street. When she reached the driver's side door, she paused, looking through the window. Lily was asleep now, her head tilted awkwardly against the glass, her breath fogging the window in soft, uneven patterns. One of her small hands was curled into the sleeve of her sweater, like she was trying to stay warm that way. Noah was still awake. He looked up the moment he saw her. There was no complaint in his eyes, no question, just quiet. That careful, watchful quiet that children learn when they understand more than they should. Elena forced a smile before she opened the door. "Hey," she said softly. Noah's face lit up a little, just enough. "Hi, Mom." She slid into the seat, the car creaking slightly under the shift of weight. The engine was still off. She hadn't wanted to waste gas while she was inside. "How long was I gone?" she asked. Noah shrugged. "Not long." It was a lie, or maybe not a lie. Maybe just the way children soften time when they know it's hard. Elena reached back, brushing Lily's hair gently away from her face. The girl stirred slightly but didn't wake. "We're going to get something to eat," Elena said, keeping her voice light. Noah's eyes flickered. Hope. Careful, restrained, like he didn't want to reach for it too quickly. "Really? Really?" She started the car. The engine turned over slowly, protesting, before finally catching. The gas light blinked on immediately. Of course it did. Elena glanced at it, then away, her jaw tightening for just a second before her expression smoothed out again. One thing at a time. Food first, always food first. As she pulled away from the curb, her mind began doing what it had been doing for weeks now, calculating, rearranging, stretching numbers that no longer stretched. There was rent, 2 months behind. There were the notices taped to her door, the polite warnings that were quickly becoming less polite. There was the phone bill she had stopped answering, because every call that came through now felt like a demand she couldn't meet. There was the grocery list that had shrunk from meals to ingredients to whatever she could justify as enough. And there was the number she couldn't stop thinking about. $11. That's what had been in her wallet this morning. $11 and some coins at the bottom of her bag. $11 between her children and hunger. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The city moved around them in blurs of gray and red lights and people who looked like they had somewhere to be, somewhere to go, somewhere that wasn't this constant edge of almost not making it. Elena had called people. She had tried. Old friends who had slowly stopped picking up. Family members who had always made it clear that help came with conditions she could never quite meet. Her aunt had answered once, just once, long enough to remind Elena that she had already been given more than enough charity growing up. long enough to make it clear there would be no more. After that, Elena stopped calling, not because she didn't need help, but because she couldn't take hearing no again. In the back seat, Noah shifted slightly. "Mom? Yeah, baby? Are we okay?" The question was soft, careful. Too careful. Elena's chest tightened so suddenly it almost stole her breath. She kept her eyes on the road, kept her voice steady. "Of course we are." There was a pause. Noah accepted that answer the way children do when they want to believe it, more than they need it to be true. "Okay," he said. Lily stirred again, murmuring something in her sleep, her hand reaching out blindly until it found Noah's sleeve. He let her hold onto it without saying anything. Elena saw it in the rearview mirror, the way they held on to each other, the way they stayed quiet, the way they made themselves smaller so she wouldn't have to carry more than she already was. And something inside her twisted, not breaking. She didn't break anymore, but bending. Under the weight of everything she was trying to hold together, she swallowed hard and blinked once, forcing the sting out of her eyes before it could become anything else. "Not now. You don't get to fall apart now. You get them fed. You get them warm. You keep going. That's it, and that's the job." Her hand moved briefly to her pocket, pressing against the folded bills inside, as if she needed to remind herself they were real, that she had done what she needed to do, that tonight at least her children would eat, and tomorrow. She would figure out tomorrow when it came. The bell above the pawn shop door rang again, not loud, not dramatic, just a small metallic sound that most people would ignore. But the man who stepped inside never ignored anything. Dante Moretti paused just past the threshold, letting the door close quietly behind him. Rain clung to the shoulders of his dark coat, catching the fluorescent light in dull, scattered reflections. He didn't brush it off. He didn't move right away. He just stood there, looking. The shop was the same as it always was. Crowded glass cases, the smell of old metal and regret, the low hum of lights that hadn't been changed in years. A place where people came to trade pieces of their lives for numbers that never felt fair. Dante had been in places like this before. Not for himself, never for himself. But he understood them, understood what it meant when someone walked through a door like this carrying something small and holding it like it mattered more than it should. His gaze moved once, slow and deliberate, the exits, the counter, the man behind it. And then he saw her. Elena Voss stood at the counter with her back half turned toward the door, unaware of him. To anyone else, she would have looked like any other woman in a pawn shop. Coat worn thin, shoes practical, hair pulled back in a way that had more to do with function than style. Ordinary, forgettable. The kind of person people looked past without realizing they had done it. But Dante didn't look past her. He looked at the details. The way her shoulders were set, not slumped, not defeated, but held upright with effort. Like posture was something she was choosing, not something that came naturally anymore. The way her hands rested against the edge of the counter, fingers flat, pressing down slightly as if she needed the surface to steady herself. The way she wasn't speaking, not rushing, not explaining, just standing there, holding herself together in a room that made most people unravel. Dante's expression didn't change. It rarely did. But something in his focus sharpened. The man behind the counter was talking now, his voice carrying that same bored impatience Dante had heard 1,000 times before. Numbers, estimates, words that reduced objects and the people attached to them into transactions. Dante stepped forward, quiet enough that his shoes barely made a sound against the worn floor. He didn't interrupt. He didn't announce himself. He moved to the side just enough to see the glass counter from a different angle, and that's when he saw it. The ring. Simple. Gold. A single diamond that caught the light in a way that wasn't loud, wasn't trying to be seen, but couldn't help it anyway. He didn't need to ask where it came from. You could always tell, not by the ring itself, but by the person letting it go. Elena's hand hovered just slightly above the glass, not touching the ring, but not fully pulling away from it either. That hesitation, that almost invisible pause. Dante noticed that. He noticed everything. The pawnbroker picked the ring up, turning it between his fingers, already calculating how little he could offer without pushing her out the door. Dante watched Elena's face, not her clothes, not her situation, her face. There were no tears, no pleading, no attempt to negotiate before hearing the number. Just a quiet stillness, the kind that doesn't come from calm, the kind that comes from having already gone through every worst-case scenario in your head and arriving anyway. He had seen desperation before, loud desperation, angry desperation, the kind that begged or demanded or tried to bargain with things that couldn't be bargained with. This wasn't that. This was controlled, contained, dignified, and that was rare. Dante slipped one hand into his coat pocket, his thumb brushing absent-mindedly against the edge of his phone, though he wasn't checking anything. He didn't look away from her, because there was something else, something most people would miss. Elena didn't look at the ring while the man inspected it. She looked at the glass, at her own faint reflection, not with vanity, not even with recognition, but with the distant focus of someone trying very hard not to feel what was about to happen. Like if she didn't look directly at it, it wouldn't hurt as much when it was gone. Dante's jaw tightened slightly, not visibly, just enough. He shifted his weight forward a fraction, closing the distance by a step, still silent, still unnoticed. The pawnbroker cleared his throat, preparing to speak, to name a number that would undervalue everything about this moment. Dante already knew what it would be. He also knew it wouldn't matter, because the value of the ring had nothing to do with gold or diamonds, and everything to do with the woman standing in front of him, a woman who hadn't begged, hadn't broken, hadn't asked for anything more than what she needed, and even that, she looked like she hated asking. Dante Moretti did not believe in coincidence. He believed in patterns, in choices, in moments that revealed who people really were when there was nothing left to hide behind. And this was one of those moments. His gaze moved once more, taking in the details that completed the picture. The slight wear on her coat sleeves, the careful way she stood, the absence of anything unnecessary. A life stripped down to what mattered. And still, she stood like she mattered too. That was the part that held his attention, not the ring, not the situation. Her, the way she refused to disappear, even here. The pawnbroker opened his mouth, and Dante took one final step forward. Now close enough, now part of the moment, now impossible to ignore. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, calm, precise, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to take control of a room. "Don't?" The word hung in the air. Don't. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The pawnbroker froze mid-sentence, the ring still pinched between his fingers. His eyes flicked up, irritation already forming, until he saw who had spoken. Something in his posture shifted immediately. Not respect, not quite fear, but recognition of something he didn't want to challenge. Elena turned, slowly. Her eyes landed on the man standing beside her. Tall, composed, his dark coat still carrying the faint trace of rain. His expression gave nothing away, but his presence filled the small space in a way that made everything else feel smaller. For a second, she just looked at him, confused, guarded. Because men didn't step into moments like this without a reason, and reasons usually came with a cost. "I was just about to give her a number," the broker said carefully, trying to recover. Dante's gaze didn't leave Elena. "Don't," he repeated, quieter this time. Final. Elena felt something tighten in her chest. Not relief, not yet. Suspicion. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, grounding herself. "I didn't ask for help," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden shift in the room. Dante's eyes moved to hers fully now, not dismissing her, not overriding her, just seeing her. "I know," he said. That was it. No explanation, no apology, just acknowledgement. The broker cleared his throat, uncomfortable now. "Look, if you're buying, then say that. Otherwise—" "I am," Dante said. Simple, decisive. The broker hesitated, then set the ring back down on the glass like it suddenly carried more weight than before. Elena's gaze dropped to it. For a moment, everything else faded. The shop, the man beside her, the fluorescent lights, all of it. Because there it was, the ring. The last piece of something she had spent years trying to survive. Her hand moved toward it without thinking, hovering just above the surface again. Close, but not touching. Because touching it now felt different. It wasn't just about selling it anymore. It was about letting it go in front of someone who had seen her do it, and that made it harder. Her throat tightened. And before she could stop it, before she could shut it down the way she always did, the memories came. Not gently. Never gently. A kitchen with chipped countertops and a voice that always sounded just a little too sharp, even when it wasn't yelling yet. You should be grateful. That was how it had started. Not with anger. With expectation. With the quiet understanding that she had been given something. Security, a home, stability. And that meant she owed something in return. At first, she believed it. At first, she had worn the ring with something close to hope. She remembered the day he put it on her finger. Marcus Hale had smiled then, soft, convincing, the kind of smile that made you think maybe this would be different, maybe this would be safe, maybe this would be enough. She had been wrong. The smile had faded first, then the patience, then the kindness. What replaced it wasn't always loud. That was the part people didn't understand. It wasn't constant screaming or visible bruises. It was quieter than that, controlled, measured. The kind of cruelty that made you question yourself before you questioned the person hurting you. You're too sensitive. You always make things harder than they need to be. You're lucky I put up with you. The words had stacked slowly, one on top of the other, until they felt like truth, until the ring on her finger stopped feeling like a promise and started feeling like a weight. But she had stayed, because leaving required money, because leaving required somewhere to go. Because leaving meant stepping into a world that had never been kind to her to begin with. And then there were the children. Lily, Noah, the only two things in that entire life that had ever been unquestionably good. She had stayed for them, until staying became more dangerous than leaving. The night she finally walked out, she hadn't taken much. A bag of clothes, a few documents, and the ring. She didn't take it because she loved him. She took it because it was the only thing she had left that might one day keep her children fed. And now, that day had come. Elena blinked, the present snapping back into place around her. The pawn shop, the glass counter, the man beside her who had interrupted something she had spent days preparing herself to do. Her jaw tightened slightly. She forced the memories back down, locking them away where they belonged. Not here, not now. Her voice when she spoke was calm again. Careful. It's not worth what you think, she said, not looking at Dante. It's just gold, a small diamond, that's all. Dante studied her. Not the ring. Her. And there was something in his gaze now that hadn't been there before. Understanding. Not of the details, not of the exact story, but of the weight, of what it costs to let something like that go. I know what it is, he said. Elena let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. You don't. Her eyes flicked to him then, and for the first time, there was something raw behind the composure. Not weakness, not quite, but truth. It's not a love story, she said quietly. The words settled between them. Simple. Final. Dante didn't respond right away. He didn't argue, didn't soften it. He just nodded once, like that was enough. Like that told him everything he needed to know. And in that moment, standing in a pawn shop with her past sitting on the glass between them, Elena realized something she hadn't expected. Letting go of the ring wasn't hard because she still believed in what it meant. It was hard because she had survived it, and this was the last proof that she had. The pawnbroker picked up the ring again, this time with a little more caution. Not because of the ring, because of the man standing beside it. He turned it under the light, slower now, as if taking extra care might somehow justify what he was about to say. His throat cleared, his eyes flicking once toward Dante, then back to the ring. Gold's good, he muttered. Diamonds, decent. Elena didn't react. She had heard this before. Different object, same tone, the slow dismantling of something that mattered into parts that didn't. The man set the ring down on the glass and leaned forward slightly. I can give you $80. The number landed like something small, something dismissive, something that didn't match the weight of the moment at all. $80. Elena stared at the ring. Her expression didn't change, but something inside her went very still. She had expected it. She had prepared for it. That didn't make it easier to hear. $80 for the last piece of her past. $80 for everything she had survived. $80 to feed her children. Her fingers twitched slightly at her sides, but she didn't reach for the ring, didn't argue, didn't negotiate, because part of her had already decided before she walked in. Whatever they offered, she would take it. Because Lily and Noah didn't care about symbolism. They cared about food. And $80 would buy food, maybe enough for a few days, maybe enough to breathe for a moment. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "Okay," she said quietly. The word was calm. Too calm. Like she had removed herself from the situation just enough to get through it. The broker nodded, already reaching for a slip of paper, ready to move the transaction forward, to reduce everything that had just happened into a receipt. And then, no. The word didn't belong to her. It came from Dante. Low, controlled, final. The broker froze again, his hand hovering above the counter. "I already gave her a number," he said, irritation creeping back into his voice, though it was thinner now, less certain. Dante didn't look at him. He looked at Elena, and Elena felt that look. Not heavy, not invasive, just direct. Like he was waiting to see what she would do, what she would accept. She held his gaze for a second, confusion flickering across her face. "I said it's fine," she told him, her voice still steady. "That's enough." Enough. The word echoed between them. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "No," he said again, quieter this time, not arguing with her, correcting the situation. He reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a wallet. The motion was unhurried, certain, the kind of movement that didn't ask permission. It assumed the outcome. The broker watched him now, fully attentive. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, not yet. Something closer to unease, because this wasn't normal. And nothing that wasn't normal came without a reason. Dante opened the wallet and slid out a stack of bills, thick, neatly folded. He didn't count them right away. He placed them on the glass beside the ring. The sound was soft, but it carried. Elena's eyes dropped to the money, then back to him. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was still calm, but now there was something underneath it. Tension. Dante didn't answer immediately. He took another stack, set it down beside the first, then another, each one placed with the same quiet precision. The broker's eyes widened slightly. Elena's breath caught, not visibly, but enough. Because now the amount wasn't just more, it was wrong. Too much. "This isn't necessary," she said, the words coming faster now. "You don't have to." "I know," Dante said. He finally looked at her again, fully. "I'm choosing to." The final stack hit the counter, and then he stopped. The room went quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. The rain tapped faintly against the windows, and between them, on the glass, was the ring, and a pile of money that didn't belong in a place like this. The broker blinked, then leaned forward slightly, unable to hide his curiosity anymore. "That's 100 times what you offered," Dante said, cutting him off without raising his voice. The broker shut his mouth. Elena stared at the money, then at the ring, then at Dante. Her heart was beating faster now, not with relief, with something sharper. "What is this?" she asked. Because it didn't make sense, because people didn't do this, because kindness, real kindness, had never come to her without a cost attached. Dante didn't move. "This," he said calmly, "is what it's worth." Elena shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "it's not." Her voice was firmer now, more certain, because this was dangerous, not physically, but in the way that things that look like help can become something else. "It's a ring," she continued. "It's gold and a small diamond, that's all." Dante's gaze didn't waver. "You're wrong." The words weren't harsh, but they landed with weight. Elena's fingers curled into her palms. "Then what is it?" she asked, quieter now. For a second, he didn't answer. And in that silence, something shifted again. Because this wasn't about the ring. It hadn't been for a while. Dante glanced once at the object on the glass, then back at her. "It's the last thing you kept," he said. Elena froze, not visibly, but completely. "And you didn't keep it because you loved what it meant," he continued. "You kept it because one day you knew you might need it." The air felt thinner suddenly. Elena's throat tightened. She hadn't said that, hadn't explained, hadn't given him anything to work with. And yet, he had seen it anyway. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "You don't know me." "No," Dante said. And then, "But I know what it looks like when someone runs out of options and still refuses to beg." The words settled between them, heavy, precise, unavoidable. Elena looked at the money again, then at him. And for the first time since he had spoken, she didn't feel saved. She felt seen. And somehow, that was more terrifying. The money sat on the glass between them, too much of it. It didn't belong there. It didn't belong to her. Elena didn't reach for it, didn't even move. Because something about taking it, just taking it, felt like stepping into something she didn't understand. And things you don't understand tend to cost more than they give. Her eyes lifted slowly to Dante Moretti. There was no confusion in her expression now, no hesitation, just a quiet, steady resolve. "Why?" she asked. The word was simple, but it carried everything: suspicion, fear, pride. Dante didn't answer immediately. He had expected the question. People always asked it, just not like this, not without desperation, not without gratitude, not without some attempt to soften the moment. Elena did none of that. She stood there, looking at him like she needed the truth more than she needed the money. That was new. The pawnbroker shifted awkwardly behind the counter, glancing between them, clearly aware he was standing in the middle of something that had nothing to do with him anymore. "Do you want me to—" he started. "No," Dante said without looking at him. The man stopped talking. Elena didn't break eye contact. "Why me?" she repeated. Her voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now, something sharper, because she wasn't asking politely. She was asking like she wouldn't take the money until she understood. Dante studied her for a moment, really studied her, the way he did with everything that mattered, not the surface, not the obvious, the truth underneath it. Most people in her position would have already taken the money, would have thanked him, would have accepted whatever explanation he gave, if they even asked for one at all. But Elena was still standing there, still holding her ground, still choosing dignity over relief, even now. Dante exhaled quietly through his nose, his gaze shifting for just a fraction of a second, not away from her, but inward, like something had surfaced that he hadn't planned to revisit today. "You remind me of someone," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Elena's brow tightened slightly. "That's not an answer," she said. Dante's eyes flicked back to hers, and for the first time, there was something there that hadn't been before. Not softness, not exactly, but something less controlled, something closer to memory. "She was my sister," he said. The pawnshop seemed to shrink slightly around the words. Elena didn't speak, didn't interrupt. Dante didn't look away. "She used to stand the same way you do," he continued, like if she kept her shoulders straight and her voice steady, no one would notice how bad things really were. Elena's chest tightened. Just slightly. Because that was too close. He hadn't asked, hadn't been told. And yet, Dante's jaw shifted subtly, the muscle tightening just beneath the surface before he forced it still again. "She didn't ask for help either," he said. "Not when she needed it. Not when she should have." The shop was quiet now. Even the hum of the light seemed lower somehow. "What happened to her?" Elena asked. She didn't know why she asked, maybe because she already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Dante held her gaze for a long moment, long enough that the silence itself became an answer. "I wasn't there," he said finally. The words were flat, controlled, but underneath them, there was something else, something heavier. "I should have been," he added. Elena felt that. Not the details, not the story, but the weight of it. The kind of weight that doesn't fade, that doesn't get easier. It just becomes part of you. Dante glanced briefly at the ring on the counter, then back at her. When I walked in, he said, you were already prepared to let that go. Elena didn't respond, because that was true. I've seen people sell things before, he continued. They rush it, they talk too much, they try to justify it. His voice lowered slightly. You didn't. Elena's fingers curled slightly at her sides again. I don't need to justify feeding my kids, she said quietly. Dante nodded once. Exactly. That single word settled something in the space between them. Not agreement, recognition. He leaned slightly forward, just enough to close the distance without crowding her. You weren't asking for help, he said. You were making a decision. Elena's throat tightened. Because that was the difference. That was the thing no one ever saw. The broker shifted again behind the counter, but neither of them paid attention to him anymore. Dante's voice softened just a fraction, not in tone, in intent. And I've spent a long time, he said, learning what it looks like when someone reaches the point where there are no good choices left, only necessary ones. Elena's eyes flickered, not away, but deeper, into something she usually kept locked down. So this is what, she asked. A correction? Dante considered that, then shook his head slightly. No. He straightened again, his presence settling back into that controlled, immovable calm. This is me choosing not to ignore it. The words were simple, but they landed harder than anything else he had said. Because they didn't feel like charity. They didn't feel like obligation. They felt like something else, something deliberate. Elena looked down at the money again, then at the ring, then back at him. Her heart was still beating too fast. Her instincts still told her to be careful. But something had shifted. Not trust, not yet, but understanding. You don't owe me anything, she said. It came out quieter this time, less defensive. Dante held her gaze. I know, he said. And then, almost as if it mattered more than anything else, that's not why I'm doing it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Of everything neither of them had said. Of everything they didn't need to. Elena took a slow breath, and for the first time since this started, she reached for the money. Elena didn't remember walking out of the pawn shop, not clearly. One moment she was standing at the counter, her hand closing around money that didn't feel real, and the next she was outside again, the cold air hitting her face, sharper this time. Grounding, her fingers tightened around the folded bills. Too much. Still too much. This doesn't just happen, she told herself. Nothing like this just happens. Behind her, the door opened again. She turned. Dante Moretti stepped out onto the sidewalk, pulling the door closed quietly behind him. The rain had eased into a fine mist, clinging to the edges of his coat, softening the hard lines of the city around them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Elena studied him, trying to understand what she had just stepped into, trying to find the catch. There's always a catch. You have children, Dante said. It wasn't a question. Elena's grip on the money tightened instinctively. Yes. His gaze shifted past her, toward the street, toward the car. She followed it. From here you could still see them. Lily's head against the window, Noah sitting upright, watching, waiting. Dante nodded once as if confirming something. Have they eaten? He asked. The question was simple, but it hit harder than anything else he had said so far. Elena hesitated, just for a second, because this was the part she didn't let people see. I was about to fix that, she said. Not a lie. Not quite the truth either. Dante didn't call her on it. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. Wait here, he said. Elena frowned slightly. I don't need... I know, he said again. Always that same answer, not dismissing her. Just steady. He stepped a few feet away, speaking quietly into the phone. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of tone that didn't ask for things. It arranged them. Elena watched him. Every instinct she had told her to be careful, to take the money and leave, to not let this become something more, because more always meant complicated, more always meant cost. But then she looked at the car again, at Lily, at Noah, and the thought slipped in before she could stop it. Just one night, just one meal. That's all this is. When Dante returned, his expression hadn't changed. "There's a place 2 blocks from here," he said. "We're going to eat." Elena shook her head immediately. "I can handle that." "I'm aware," he said calmly. That answer again. It didn't leave room for argument. It also didn't take anything away from her, which made it harder to refuse. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Okay." The word felt strange, like stepping into something she didn't fully trust, but couldn't walk away from either. They crossed the street together, Elena moving quickly to the car. She opened the back door, brushing Lily's hair gently. "Hey, baby," she murmured. Lily stirred, blinking up at her. "Mom?" "We're getting dinner," Elena said softly. Lily sat up immediately. Noah's eyes lit up in that same careful way. "Really?" he asked. Elena smiled. This time it felt a little easier. "Really?" Dante stood a few steps back, giving her space, watching, not intruding, just there. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was warm. The kind of place where the lights were soft and the smell of food wrapped around you the second you stepped inside. Lily and Noah slid into the booth like they weren't sure they were allowed to sit there, like this might disappear if they moved too fast. Elena sat across from them, her hands folded for a moment on the table. Dante took the seat at the end, not across from her, not opposite, just present. Menus came, but he didn't hand them to her, didn't assume. He simply looked at Elena. "Order what they want," he said. Elena hesitated, then looked at her children. "What do you guys want?" Lily's voice was small. "Anything?" Elena swallowed. "Anything." That was all it took. The orders came out quickly after that. Too quickly. Like someone had already made sure of it. Food filled the table. More than enough. Too much, even. Lily stared at it. Noah looked at Elena. Elena nodded. "Go ahead." They didn't need to be told twice, but they still ate carefully, like they were afraid it might be taken away. Dante watched that. Not the food, not the table, the way they ate. The way Elena watched them while pretending not to. The way she didn't touch her own plate until she was sure they had enough. "You can eat," he said quietly. Elena looked up. "I know." But her hand moved anyway. Small bite, measured, habit. Silence settled over the table. Not uncomfortable, just full of warmth, of something unfamiliar. After a while, Lily leaned against Elena's side, full and sleepy. Noah slowed, his energy fading into that quiet contentment kids only reach when they're finally not hungry anymore. Elena exhaled slowly, and something in her shoulders dropped, just a little. Dante noticed that too. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, not guarded, not as much. "I didn't marry for love," she said. The words came without warning, even to her. But once they started, they didn't stop. "I'm married because I needed somewhere to go," she continued, "and he offered that." Dante didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. He just listened, the way people don't anymore. "It wasn't bad at first," she said. "That's how it works. It's never bad at first." Her fingers traced the edge of the table absently. Then it changed, slowly, in ways you don't notice right away. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes had gone somewhere else. "He didn't hit me every day," she said. "That's the part people don't understand. It's not constant. It's controlled. Enough to remind you, not enough to prove it." Dante's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. "I stayed longer than I should have," she admitted, "because leaving meant having nothing, and I already knew what that felt like." She glanced at Lily, at Noah, softened. "I left when staying became worse than that." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, but not suffocating, because for the first time, she wasn't carrying it alone. Elena looked at Dante, really looked at him. "I kept the ring," she said quietly. "Not because I wanted it, but because I knew one day I might need it." Dante nodded once. He already knew that. I just didn't think that day would come like this. Her voice almost broke on that. Almost. But she caught it. She always did. Dante leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable again. But his voice, when he spoke, was different, lower, quieter. You made it this far, he said. Elena blinked, caught off guard. That's not nothing. The words landed differently than anything else had. Because they weren't pity, they weren't sympathy, they were recognition. And Elena felt something shift again. Not fear, not this time. Something warmer, something steadier, for the first time in a long time. She felt safe enough to tell the truth and not regret it. Morning came quietly, the kind of quiet Elena wasn't used to. No shouting through thin walls, no footsteps in the hallway that made her body tense before her mind caught up, no sudden noises that pulled her out of sleep like something was wrong. Just stillness. Soft light filtered through the curtains, pale and gentle, settling across the room in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. For a few seconds, Elena didn't move. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, her body caught between rest and the instinct to brace for something that wasn't coming. Then she turned her head. Lily was curled up beside her, one small arm tucked under her cheek, her breathing slow and even. Noah was sprawled across the other side of the bed, one leg kicked free from the blanket, his face relaxed in a way Elena hadn't seen in a long time. They were warm. They were safe. That thought settled into her chest slowly, carefully, like it didn't want to scare her by arriving too quickly. Elena pushed herself up, moving quietly so she wouldn't wake them. Her feet touched the floor, soft carpet instead of cold wood, and she paused again, grounding herself in the reality of where they were. The hotel room, clean, warm, temporary, but real. She stepped into the small sitting area, wrapping her arms around herself more out of habit than need. There was coffee already waiting, still warm. She stared at it for a moment, then at the neatly folded clothes laid out beside it. Simple, practical, her size. Elena exhaled slowly. Of course he had thought of that too. Her fingers tightened slightly against her arms. This is too much. It had been echoing in her head since last night. Too much care, too much attention, too much understanding from someone who didn't know her. People didn't do this, not without a reason, not without expecting something in return. The thought settled heavy in her chest again. She picked up the coffee anyway, took a small sip. Warm. Real. For a moment she let herself have that. Just that. A knock at the door broke the silence. Not loud, not urgent, just precise. Elena stilled, every instinct she had sharpened immediately, old habits rising before she could stop them. Her eyes moved to the bedroom. The kids were still asleep. Good. She set the cup down carefully and moved toward the door, each step controlled. She didn't open it right away. Who is it? She asked. A pause. Then, it's me. Dante? Of course. She exhaled quietly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders, though not all of it. Not yet. She unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see him. He stood in the hallway the same way he always did, still, composed, his presence filling the space without effort. No rush, no impatience, just certainty. Did I wake you? He asked. Elena shook her head. No. It wasn't entirely true, but it didn't matter. He nodded once, then held something out to her. A small box, simple, dark. Elena's gaze dropped to it, then back to him. What is that? She asked. Dante didn't answer immediately. Open it, he said. Elena hesitated, just for a second, because something about this felt heavier than everything else. Slower, more deliberate. She took the box. It felt light in her hands, too light. Her fingers moved to the lid, lifting it carefully. And then she froze. The ring sat inside, exactly as she had left it. Gold, simple. The diamond catching the soft hallway light in that same quiet way. For a second, Elena didn't breathe. Her mind struggled to catch up with what she was seeing. That's, she started, her voice barely there. I sold this. Dante watched her. I bought it, he said. The words were calm, matter of fact, like it was that simple. Elena's eyes flicked up to his. Confusion, shock, something deeper. She stopped, trying to find the right words. Why would you give it back? Her fingers hadn't moved. The box stayed open in her hands, the ring untouched. Because this didn't make sense. Selling it had been hard, but clear, necessary. This complicated it. Dante leaned slightly against the doorframe, his gaze steady on her. Because it doesn't belong in a pawn shop, he said. Elena shook her head faintly. That's not an answer. His expression didn't change. It's not supposed to be a reminder of him, he continued. The words were quiet, but they landed. Elena's throat tightened, her eyes dropped to the ring again. It already is, she said softly. Years of memory sat in that small circle of gold. Not love and not comfort, just weight. Dante took a step closer. Not enough to crowd her, just enough to shift the space between them. No, he said. Elena looked up, and for the first time, there was something different in his voice. Not just control, not just certainty, something intentional. It's a reminder of what you survived, he said. The words settled into her, deep, unavoidable. Elena's fingers trembled slightly against the box. I didn't keep it for that, she admitted quietly. I know. Of course he did. He always seemed to know. Dante's gaze didn't leave hers. You kept it because you knew one day it might keep your kids fed, he said. And it did. Elena swallowed hard. Emotion pressed up against her chest, sudden and sharp. But that doesn't mean it gets to define you, he added. Her breath caught. Because no one had ever said that before. Not like that. Not in a way that separated her from what had happened to her. Elena looked down at the ring again. Really looked at it. Not as a memory, not as a weight, but as something neutral, something that had been part of her story, but wasn't her. Slowly, carefully, she reached in and picked it up. The metal was cool against her skin, familiar, but different now. Her fingers curled around it, not holding on, just holding it. Dante watched her, said nothing, because this moment didn't need words. After a second, Elena let out a slow breath. I don't want it to mean him anymore, she said. Her voice was quiet, but steady. Dante nodded once. Then don't let it. Simple. Like it was that easy. Maybe it wasn't, but for the first time, it felt possible. Elena closed the box slowly, her grip firmer now, more certain. Thank you, she said. The words were different this time. Not polite, not automatic. Real. Dante inclined his head slightly. You're welcome. There was a pause, a quiet moment where neither of them moved. And then, Elena stepped back slightly, still holding the box. I should check on the kids, she said. Dante nodded. I'll be downstairs. She hesitated, just for a second. Then, okay. She closed the door gently, leaning back against it for a moment, the box still in her hands, her heart still beating too fast, but not from fear, from something else, something new. Elena looked down at the ring, and for the first time since she had taken it off, it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning of something else entirely. The first sign that something was different didn't come from Dante. It came from the way people looked at him. Elena noticed it in small moments at first. The hotel staff, who had been warm and chatty the night before, were still polite, but quieter now, more careful. Their smiles lingered a fraction too long, like they were trying to prove something, like they were aware of him even when he wasn't in the room. A man in a suit crossed the lobby that morning, glanced at Dante once and immediately changed direction. Not subtle, not accidental, avoidance. Elena stood near the window, her arms loosely wrapped around herself, watching it all unfold without fully understanding it yet. Dante stood a few feet away, speaking quietly into his phone. His posture was relaxed, but the space around him wasn't. It felt controlled, like everything in a 10-foot radius had quietly rearranged itself to accommodate him. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. When he looked up, his eyes went straight to her. Not searching, not scanning, certain. You ready? He asked. Elena nodded, though her gaze lingered on him a second longer than usual. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safer," he said simply. Safer. The word settled into her, heavier than it should have. She glanced back toward the hallway where Lily and Noah were finishing breakfast, laughing softly over something small and unimportant. Safe. That mattered more than anything. So she nodded again. "Okay?" The car waiting outside wasn't the same one from yesterday. This one was darker, heavier, the kind of vehicle that didn't just drive, it moved with purpose, and the man standing beside it straightened immediately when Dante stepped out. "Sir," Dante gave a small nod. No introduction, no explanation. Elena noticed the way the man's eyes flicked to her briefly, assessing, not disrespectful, just aware. Then to the kids, then back to Dante, like he was cataloging information without being told to. Elena felt it again, that quiet shift in the air. She helped Lily into the back seat, then Noah, her movements automatic, but her thoughts were not. "Dante," she said as she slid into the seat beside him, her voice lower now. He turned his head slightly. "Yes?" "Who are you?" she asked, not accusing, not afraid, just needing to understand. He studied her for a second, not surprised by the question, not avoiding it either. "Someone who makes sure problems don't come back," he said. Elena held his gaze. "That's not a real answer." A pause. Then, "It's the only one that matters right now." The car started moving, and Elena let it go. For now. The building they arrived at didn't look like much from the outside. Plain, clean, anonymous. But inside, it was different, too secure, too quiet, the kind of place where nothing happened unless someone allowed it. Elena felt it the second she stepped through the door. Two men stood near the entrance, not guards, not officially. But their eyes tracked everything. Their posture gave nothing away, except readiness. Dante walked in like he owned the space, and no one questioned it. "Rooms are ready," one of the men said. Dante nodded once. "Good?" He gestured slightly for Elena and the kids to follow. No explanation, no hesitation, like this was normal, like this was his world. And for the first time, Elena understood something she hadn't wanted to name before. This wasn't just a man with money. This was a man with power, the kind that didn't need to be announced, the kind people adjusted themselves around without being told. Later, when the kids were settled, fed, warm, distracted with a movie in a room that felt safer than anywhere they'd been in a long time, Elena found Dante standing alone near a window. City stretched out beneath him, controlled, ordered, distant. She stepped closer. "You didn't tell me," she said, and he didn't turn. "I didn't think it mattered yet." Elena let out a slow breath. "It matters now." He turned then, fully. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened slightly. "What do you think I am?" he asked. Elena held his gaze. "I think people are afraid of you," she said. "Honest, simple, true." A beat of silence passed between them. "And does that make you afraid?" he asked. Elena considered that, really considered it. Then she shook her head. No. It wasn't blind trust, it wasn't ignorance, it was something else, something she couldn't fully explain. Dante watched her for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Good. The word settled. Heavy, certain, and then a knock at the door, sharp, not hesitant. Dante's entire posture shifted, not visibly, but Elena felt it. That subtle tightening, that readiness. He moved toward the door, opened it just enough to speak to the man on the other side. Elena couldn't hear everything, just fragments. Confirmed. He's asking around. Name came up. Dante's jaw tightened slightly. Then, bring me everything. The door closed. Slow. Controlled. Elena's stomach dropped. What is it? She asked. Dante turned back to her, and this time, there was no softening, no careful distance, just truth. Marcus Hale, he said. The name hit her like a physical blow. Her body reacted before her mind did, shoulders tightening, breath catching, hands curling instinctively at her sides. No, she whispered. Not again. Not here. Not after everything. Dante watched her carefully, noticing everything, always. He's been looking for you, he continued. Elena shook her head, panic rising now, sharp and familiar. I didn't tell anyone where we were. I know, Dante said calmly. That stopped her, just for a second. I know, he repeated. His voice didn't rise, didn't harden, but it changed, lower, colder, certain in a way that cut through her panic. He won't find you, Dante said. Elena stared at him, fear still twisting in her chest. You don't know him, she said, her voice tighter now. You don't know what he's like. I know exactly what he's like, Dante interrupted, not loudly, but with something final in it. Elena fell silent, because there it was again, that shift, that edge. Dante stepped closer, not invading, but close enough that she couldn't miss what he was saying. Men like him, he said quietly, only have power when no one stops them. Elena's throat tightened. And you think you can? She asked. It wasn't a challenge. It was fear, honest and unfiltered. Dante held her gaze, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. Not just control, not just composure, something darker, something dangerous, and something that didn't hesitate. Yes, he said, just that. No explanation, no hesitation, just certainty. Elena's breath caught, because she believed him, not because she understood how, not because she knew what it meant, but because of the way he said it, the way the air itself seemed to settle around that word. Yes, Dante's voice softened slightly after a second, not losing the edge, just redirecting it. You're not alone anymore, Elena, he said. The words landed deeper than anything else. Not alone, not unprotected, not invisible. Her eyes stung slightly, but she didn't look away, didn't break. Neither are your kids, he added. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Just a second, letting that sink in, letting herself feel it. Then she nodded, slow, certain. When she opened her eyes again, Dante was still there, exactly where he said he would be. And for the first time, the fear in her chest didn't disappear, but it changed, because now it wasn't just hers to carry. The first thing that changed wasn't the apartment. It wasn't the new clothes folded neatly in drawers, or the steady groceries in the kitchen, or even the quiet, constant security that existed like an invisible shield around her life. It was the way Elena Voss walked into a room. She noticed it one morning without meaning to. A classroom. Early. Sunlight stretching across rows of desks, the low murmur of students settling in, bags dropping, chairs scraping softly against the floor. Elena paused in the doorway for half a second, not because she was afraid, because she realized she wasn't. She stepped inside, and she didn't take the seat in the back like she would have before. She didn't scan the room for the least noticeable place, the smallest corner, the safest way to exist without being seen. She walked straight down the center aisle, and she sat in the front row. Her hands didn't shake, her shoulders didn't curl inward. She simply sat, like she belonged there, like she had every right to take up that space. Because she did. Because someone had looked at her, not at her circumstances, not at her past, not at the damage, and had seen something worth protecting. And somewhere along the way, she had started to see it too. Later that afternoon, she stood outside the school gates waiting for Lily and Noah. The air was warmer now, spring pushing its way into the city with stubborn persistence. Kids ran past her laughing, backpacks bouncing, voices bright and unguarded. Lily spotted her first. "Mom!" she ran. No hesitation, no worry, no scanning the world like it might turn dangerous at any second. Just a child running toward her mother. Elena knelt just in time to catch her, arms wrapping tight, holding on for a second longer than necessary. Noah followed more slowly, but his smile, small, steady, real, said everything he didn't. "Can we stop for ice cream?" Lily asked immediately, already bouncing with energy. Elena laughed, a real laugh, easy. "Yes," she said, not calculating, not worrying about the cost, just yes. They walked together down the street, Lily talking about something that happened at school, Noah adding quiet corrections, Elena listening, really listening, without the constant background noise of fear. No one was chasing them. No one was waiting to take something away. The world felt open. That evening, the apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes. Elena stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot, the sound of cartoons drifting in from the living room where Lily and Noah sat curled into the couch. It was simple, ordinary, and it felt like everything. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. She knew it was him. Dante stepped inside, the quiet weight of his presence filling the space in a way that was no longer intimidating. Just steady, grounded. He set his keys down, loosened his cuffs, and for a moment, he just watched her. The way she moved now, the way she stood, no longer along the edges, in the center, like she had always belonged there. "You're home early," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "I wanted to be," he replied. Simple, honest. He stepped closer, stopping just behind her, not touching, not crowding, just there. "How was class?" he asked. Elena smiled slightly, stirring the sauce. "Good," she said. "Better than good." He nodded once, like that mattered. Because to him, it did. After dinner, after the kids were asleep, Lily sprawled sideways across her bed, Noah curled under his blanket with a book still open in his hands. Elena stood by the window. The city stretched out below, lights flickering, alive. She held something in her hand, the ring. Dante hadn't said anything when he gave it back to her. No speech, no explanation, just placed it in her palm like it belonged there. At first, she hadn't known what to do with it. It had been a symbol of something painful, something she had survived, something she had escaped. But now, it felt different. She turned it slowly between her fingers, gold catching the light, not heavy anymore, not suffocating, just a piece of her story. Dante stepped into the room behind her. "You're thinking," he said quietly. She glanced back at him. "Always?" He moved closer, stopping beside her this time, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. "What about?" he asked. Elena looked down at the ring, then back out at the city. "For a long time," she said slowly, "I thought this was the worst thing that ever happened to me." She held it up slightly, like it proved something about me, about what I was worth. Dante didn't interrupt. He just listened. "I thought letting it go meant I was losing the last piece of something important," she continued. A pause. Then, "But I think," she exhaled softly, "I think it was never about the ring." Dante's gaze shifted to her. "What was it about?" he asked. Elena met his eyes. "Being seen," she said. The words landed quietly, but they filled the room. "Not for what I could give," she added. "Not for what I could survive, just seen." Dante held her gaze, steady, unmoving. "You were always worth that," he said. Elena's throat tightened slightly. "I know that now," she replied. And she did. Not because he told her, because she had started to believe it. She looked down at the ring one more time, then gently closed her fingers around it, not to hide it, not to get rid of it, but to keep it on her terms. She stepped closer to him, not hesitant, not uncertain, just choosing. Dante's hand came up, resting lightly at the back of her neck. Familiar, steady, real. "You're not invisible anymore," he said quietly. Elena smiled. Soft, certain. "I never was," she said, a beat. Then, "I just hadn't met the right eyes yet." Dante's expression shifted slightly. Something deeper, something that didn't need words. He leaned down, pressing his forehead gently against hers. Not a dramatic gesture, not a grand one. Just close, present, real. And Elena stood there with him, the city glowing around them, her children safe in the next room, her past no longer something that defined her, but something she had survived, something she had walked through, something that had led her here, to this moment, to this life, to the understanding that what she had always been worth had never changed. Someone had just finally seen it. And once she saw it too, there was no going back.